Nuclear Weapons Pact and Disarmament. Prague. President Obama came to this medieval city last spring to lay out a bold vision of a world without nuclear weapons. A year later, he arrives back here on Thursday to sign a treaty with Russia that envisions a world with thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons still. Under the so-called New START Treaty, the two powers will pare their arsenals but still deploy 1,550 warheads each, on top of thousands and thousands of others not even covered by the Pact, all of which raises this question. Nearly 2 decades after the end of the Cold War, with terrorists or terrorism rather than Soviet despots the main threat, why does the world still need so many nuclear weapons? And I would say that's a very good question. Your arms control advocates, it does not, and they are disappointed at what they see as a very modest step toward Mr. Obama's own disarmament goal. To national security hawks, though, the United States still needs a robust nuclear force to ensure no other power is tempted to challenge it, and that defines the challenge confronting Mr. Obama as he tries to navigate between these conflicting imperatives. From the start, he acknowledged that eliminating nuclear weapons was a generational task, unlikely to be achieved even during my lifetime, but that might not possibly be the way it is. And as he put it once again in an interview this week, but as long as Russia is reluctant to reduce its force faster, there will be political leaders at home who will oppose any drastic American drawdown as well. So, what will it take to get rid of nuclear weapons? They say the president is a realist, said an arms control expert at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And he knows very well he can go out and give 10 more Prague speeches, or 10 speeches even more visionary. And if he can't get even a modest reduction treaty like START ratified by the Senate, so what? What difference does it really make? Senate ratification requires 67 votes, which means it must include Republicans. You can't do that with sweeping visionary language. The tension between promise and pragmatism came through in the so-called Nuclear Posture Review document Mr. Obama released this week. While it narrows first strike policy, renounces development of new nuclear warheads, and expresses an intent to further cut stockpiles, it lays out few specifics of how to do that. Supposedly, further reductions will be contingent on new negotiations. The reason is that even after the fall of the Soviet Union, only Russia matches American nuclear power. Russia deploys 2,600 strategic warheads. The United States deploys approximately 2,100. Both have thousands more reserve warheads, or tactical warheads that future negotiations will try to limit. By contrast, China has an estimated 180 warheads. India and Pakistan each have about 70 or 80, and North Korea just a few. Then Israel has approximately somewhere around 100 or so. And there might even be more that are not completely accounted for. James N. Miller, Jr., the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, said that while the two arsenals need not be equal, we still believe that approximate parity is appropriate with respect to, in particular, deployed strategic or strategy systems, especially to make sure there aren't misperceptions misunderstandings on either side, any sense of advantage or disadvantage. Arms control advocates argue that such thinking is dated. To move so slowly down to 1,550 deployed strategic nuclear weapons, it doesn't make any sense, said John Isaacs, Executive Director of the Council for a Livable World. I think we could easily go down to 1,000 or below, regardless of the Russians. Anyway, just 20 nuclear bombs or weapons going off at the same time could cause a nuclear winter. So, what difference does it make if they still have thousands and thousands of them? It's still way too many. But conservatives warn that American stockpiles and policy ought to not be completely driven by today's more peaceful, or so they say, peaceful circumstances, but by potential threats. And what are the threats? Is not it more possible that a terrorist or a terrorist group, something on that order, obtain a nuclear weapon, then they're being used by a nation? Thomas G. Mankin, a professor of strategy at the United States Naval War College and a former Pentagon official under President George W. Bush, noted that the world fell into two wars that killed tens of millions of people in the 3 decades before the advent of nuclear weapons, but have not done so since. As horrific as they are, nuclear weapons have prevented large-scale war for decades. He said, I'm not all that excited about making the world safe for conventional war again, but perhaps it's much more than that. The treaty to be signed by Mr. Obama and the President of Russia will replace the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty of 1991, or START, which expired last December, and the Treaty of Moscow, signed by the last president in 2002. Russian officials said it would be 15 pages, with a 154-page protocol outlining specific procedures for verification. In addition to the warhead limit, each country within 7 years must cut its total land, sea, and air-based launchers to 800 each, and no more than 700 actually deployed. While that still permits enormous destructive power, it continues a process that has brought down nuclear arms considerably since the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, when the two sides together deployed more than 19,000 strategic warheads. But central to the Russian resistance to deeper cuts are American plans to build a missile defense system in Europe to counter any Iranian threat. Moscow worries that a shield could neutralize its smaller arsenal. Mr. Obama rejected restrictions on anti-ballistic missile systems, or ABM, in the new treaty, but Russia has offered conflicting interpretations. A summary by the Foreign Ministry said, the new treaty contains no provision setting limits on the development of the U.S. ABM systems, but a Kremlin document called the preamble language about the relationship between offensive and defensive weapons legally binding, something the Obama administration denies. The missile defense system, coupled with Russia's deteriorated conventional forces, foster insecurity that will make it that much harder for Mr. Obama to move toward his goal of a nuclear-free world. But that is something that must happen. A nuclear-free world must really happen. And even though most people might not realize it, it must happen fairly quickly, perhaps before a lifetime or Mr. Obama's lifetime. It's very possible, because these are more times or more signs of the end times, transition days. There is a real transition going on. Everything that must change rapidly. And yes, these are more signs